Students around the world are finishing their qualifications so they can get ahead in life and make their contribution. If you are studying, researching, or thinking about it, you will need practical tips, techniques, coaching, and support to help you get finished and be successful. I'm Peter Alkemer, the Student Success Coach, and welcome to the podcast. Each episode, I interview successful students and leaders in education so that you will learn everything you need right here. You will learn about writing, completing your thesis and other projects, planning, discipline, how to get more done, supervisors, getting published, getting finished, how to have the right discipline, and many other aspects of student life. Whether you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, Google, or any other podcast platform, please leave a rating and a review. Or if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Either way, please get in touch and let us know what you think of the show and what you want to hear more of. Please always check the show notes for links to courses, material, and plenty more so that you can use what you've learned in each episode, take action, and achieve your student success. Please also join the Student Success Coach community in our exclusive members-only Facebook group where I post regularly and you can interact with fellow students just like yourself. Remember, you can't do this alone, so reach out, get involved, and take advantage. It's my commitment to your success. Now for this week's episode. Chante, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. It's really fantastic to have you in studio for this edition of the Student Success Coach. And our listeners today are going to be students typically, or people thinking about studying, and really very keen just to hear from other students and particularly successful students. And we have educational leaders on the show, just the practical tips and techniques of how to be successful. So I'm going to really, get into that in terms of your journey so that we can really unlock that experience and insights for our listeners. But before we get there, give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and your own student journey, and particularly your recent successes that we can celebrate with you.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having me. I'm really delighted to be part of this and just to share my experience and my journey as well. So just background, first of all, I'm actually an athlete. I've always been, and I think being an athlete has really contributed to being successful and contributing to my success in my academic career as well. So one of the highlights during my athletics career was competing in the World Championships in 2012 in Spain. And I mean, just having that determination, that hard work, being motivated has contributed to being successful in my academic career as well. So with my undergraduate degree, I completed a BCom Entrepreneurial Management, followed by my honors, which focused on strategic management. Then I did my master's. I didn't take a break. Also moving on to strategic management. But there I really focused on entrepreneurship and the intention amongst the youth of becoming an entrepreneur, having an alternative option for a career rather than just, let's call it, following the tradition of studying or completing your high school, moving into a normal, let's say, working environment. And then currently I'm a PhD student. I'm doing my doctorate degree in business management, but this focuses on the fourth industrial revolution. So it really fits quite nice into where we are currently at in terms of technology and how we should adopt technologies as well. So my thesis is titled Digitalization of SMEs, small medium enterprises, their business models. And each and every aspect of my academic career has really contributed to where I am today. I mean, if I look at currently, I'm a fourth industrial revolution ambassador for the University of Johannesburg. And I'm currently also, we're looking at gamification in our department. So I've developed a few games as well. And how can we make the education a bit more fun? And I would never have anticipated this where we'd be 7 years ago. I mean, if I just look at how the journey has walked and how just life has happened. And yeah, I mean, that's just a bit about myself. So I'm planning on hopefully to complete the PhD end of next year. But I think I'm just one of those that love studying. I just love to learn. So you never know. Perhaps after the PhD, I might start a new degree. It's just, I enjoy the studying. It's really just fun.
I must introduce you to my good friend Jeff. He's just completed his second PhD.
Oh.
So, and we're having him on the show actually, so it would be an interesting one for you to listen into. But Chante, that just sounds like such a fantastic journey, and you know how you linked in, you know, your athletic ability and determination, you know, with your student success and the journey. And I guess, you know, people have said that a PhD is like a marathon. You know, you've really got to go into it for the long haul and take each section of it at a time, but maintain the long-term vision of where it is that you want to get to.
Yes, that's definitely true. I cannot argue with that at all. It's definitely a journey, and it's about being prepared for that, putting in the effort. And at the end of the day, yes, you only get a certificate and you get that walk over the stage, but the journey that you've walked to get there is just, it's hard work, and people don't always see that. And it's the same with being an athlete. You just run 100 meters or 200 meters, but the amount of effort that you've been putting just to run for 12 seconds, it's really a lot. But I'm sure that's like with everything in life. You put in a lot more just to get that goal at the end of the day. Yeah.
And Chante, as a student, I mean, what would you say? How have you approached that? And I mean, I think your point is so valid that people don't see the hours and hours that we sit at night and the hard work that we put in. As you say, yes, it's a certificate, and ultimately we hopefully can make a contribution. And sounds like you're making a massive contribution in your role as an ambassador for Fourth Industrial Revolution at the University of Johannesburg. But and maybe there's learnings from your years as an athlete. But how do you? What is the secret to your success in terms of the hard work and the hours that you have to put in terms of the academic outcomes that you need to achieve?
Well, I think it's all about not being able, you shouldn't give up. First of all, having a goal in life. Where is it that you want to be? And I think that's really important in terms of, if I had to look at what is student success for me, is having that goal and set that goal. That goal can either be, do you want to graduate with a distinction? Do you want to be top of your class? But on the other side, it can also be just to develop knowledge, to be able to develop a sense of responsibility, growing up, self-reliance. And then also on a completely different angle is, how do you interact socially? How do you interact with your wider community, for example? And I think it all depends on what you want in life, because if you don't know what it is that you're working towards, you might not be as committed and driven to achieve that goal at the end of the day. And I think for me, from the start, is initially I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I mean, I want to start my own business. I want to be a project manager, just something like that. And I mean, looking back, I'm not one of those. I mean, currently I'm a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg. And I think life just happens, and you need to adapt to it. And you need to, you learn a lot about yourself and you grow. But ultimately, I always said I want to do a PhD degree. I want to be, let's call it, I call myself Dr. C. And I just want to be that. And irrespective of where I'm going to be, a lot of people said, you know what, you're going to be overqualified. You don't need a doctor's degree to go into the corporate environment. But I said, that's fine. I want to do that. That's my personal goal in life. And if it fits, if it doesn't fit, I'm going to take it as I go along. And I think that's really important, is just to understand that goal. And I mean, I'm not saying you need to know what you want to be when you pass matric, or when you first year in the university. I mean, I didn't know. Being an entrepreneur is quite wide. We all want to have the luxury of being our own boss, but life doesn't always work that way. And I just think having an idea of what is it that you want to achieve, it being a manager on the age of 30, for example, or having your own business on the age of 30, or just working with people, having at least an idea of what it is that you want in life. And that can give you some guidance and motivation to work towards that. And I think that was one of my things, is I always wanted to be also an Olympic athlete. But then life decided, well, you're going to get a major injury. And yes, now I'm struggling to get back to where I was. But I mean, look at the other successes that I've achieved in life. And I think that's also you shouldn't also just be focused on one angle. I mean, we all have different passions and interests in life, and just to figure out what that is, I think that's part of the student journey. It's getting to know yourself and where you want to be and what you want to do in life. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, just learning and growing and just achieving that goal at the end.
I love what you're saying, and I think, you know, some people will say, I want to achieve something in life, therefore I have to do a PhD. Whereas you said, I want to do a PhD. Yes, it might help me with other goals in my life, but you set the goal at the right level that gives you the motivation to do what you need to get that done. And if you see PhD as a stepping stone, it in itself, it comprises of hundreds of stepping stones, you know, and I think you need a lot of motivation to get a PhD done. And when you link it to that specific outcome, and that certainly was my experience, I had no anticipation of any career growth or any other life goals as a result of doing my PhD. I just wanted to do a PhD. It was a little bit selfish. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing research, and I, you know, have made some contributions that I did on agile software development teams. But I would be happy if no one else ever knew I had a PhD. You know, yes, you know, it's great and it's good and you tell people about it and so on, but I think my story is very similar to yours. And I think that it was almost like I got my PhD and then I said, okay, what now? Type of thing. So very similar to yourself, Chante. Okay, Chante, and then so I mean, okay, so you did your undergraduate degree, then you went in to do your honors, you did your masters, you did your PhD, and seems like that, you know, you sort of kept that ongoing lifelong learning approach going, which I think is so important. And you know, people I've spoken to over the years are like, yeah, I need to do this, and then you catch up with them a couple of years later, and you've gone on and done it while they were still thinking about it. And yes, life happens, as you say, but you kind of have to seize the moment and just get going, because you know the great words of wisdom is, think back a year from now and what is it that you should be doing today that you'll be grateful for. And what I'm keen to understand from you, Chante, and just where you can help our listeners maybe, is for people that are also on that journey and going through those different levels or hoping to maybe move through them at some stage, maybe break down for everyone what you see and what you experienced as the difference in the levels of acquiring knowledge, developing knowledge, and making a contribution through those 4 levels of academic study.
Yes, well, I think that's really important, because I don't sometimes, especially for me personally, moving from grade 12 to my first year of study, it was quite a big jump. And I don't always think that they prepare you for that. And I mean, now it's university life, it's very more independent. There's not someone that's going to spoon feed you. There's not someone going to say, remember, you've got your homework that's due or your assessment that's due, and prepare for your test. And I think for the undergraduates, especially the first 3 years, I mean, that's really from matric or grade 12 specifically to the first years, just to bridge the gap between that. And I think your first year is really understanding. I want to say it's more general. I think for any qualification that you're going to do, I don't think it's just relevant to mine, is just understanding what this is, what you are studying, understanding the theoretical aspects thereof, just getting an understanding, and before you can jump into the application thereof. Because I think a lot of students have this perception, and I'm talking from a lecturer perspective as well now, is from day one, it needs to be reality about the working world, which is not the case. You first need to understand the concepts thereof before we can start to apply it. And that's why we progress. So first year, you understand it. Second year, we're starting to apply it. In third year, we expect you to make the connection between theory, let's call it the textbook content, and the reality thereof. And then for me specifically, in my honors degree, that was even a bigger jump, because that was practical, like you couldn't. It was like really putting you in a real life working environment. So for example, we played a simulation game. So that was, we were in teams. We were literally running this business. So it was like I think it was a running shoes that we had to sell. and you had to make real life decisions. So should I take out a loan now, a business loan? But what's going to be the impact? How many pairs of shoes should I manufacture? How many pairs do I anticipate to sell? And suddenly it was like, oh my, this is reality. This is what people are actually doing in the corporate environment or in the working environment. And I think students should also just understand that there's a reason to grow. There's a reason why you have a first, second, and third year. And enjoy each one and learn something from each level or each stepping stone, as you mentioned. So try to understand there's a reason why you need to, let's call it, be a parrot. And what is business management? Planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Know that off by heart, because there's a reason why you need to know that. Because what does planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, for example, mean if you go out and you work? What does it mean to plan an event or organize an event? And I think that was, for me, I was one of those students, first year. But I mean, really, why do I need to? I've got the textbook. I'm always going to have the textbook. Why do I need to know this off by heart? Why are you asking me this in a test or exam? And I never realized that, you know what, third year honors, I need to make that link. And then again, you get to the working environments, and it's different from the textbook. It's different from the theoretical content that you learn. And that's once again why there's the different levels, getting back to that level of applying that knowledge and understanding it. And for me, I think out of my entire 3 years and my honors was really the one that prepared me for what I need to know to go into the work environment. Working in different teams. For example, the one we had to present the lecture. We had to decide on the content. We had to organize an entire event, get people together, organize the food, the drinks, doesn't matter. And just understanding that, I want to say, don't grow too fast. Don't try to jump the gun from day one. There's a reason for everything. And I mean, if I knew that from day one, I might have approached it differently. I might have had a better understanding or better appreciation for the theoretical content in my first year, growing to my second, and understand, because sometimes the students, but why case studies? Why do you have case studies and apply the knowledge to that? And initially, I also thought about, but why? I mean, a case study is just a case study, but it's not. That's actually how the environment is out there. That's actually things that organizations experience, and we want to see what is your understanding from it. So yes, I think that's my biggest, is just take each step for what it is and learn from each step, because that's really important. And like I mentioned, don't jump the gun and just say, you know what, I want to be at the finish line, but I don't want to walk the journey to understand the reason behind everything. So that, yeah, that was my experience from first to third year, and then my honors degree as well.
And I guess now master's and then PhD, obviously, you know, you're at the pinnacle of that academic journey, really, where you're invited into quite an exclusive club, if you like, where you've had a proposal accepted by your institution, and now you're being supported to then create knowledge, you know, which feeds the bottom of the cycle again with the textbooks and the definitions. And hopefully, and I think in your case, and I'd love to talk a little about your research just now, you know, gives us and the students and that sort of entry level you know, academic content and keeps it up to date with, you know, what is happening with regards to fourth industrial revolution. But I wanted to, Chante, just ask you, I mean, so you've given us a great sense of the evolution of those levels, you know, and you went through them as a student. And I don't know whether you know, how much you had planned to go into lecturing and found yourself. Did you, I mean, are you lecturing now back at the same university that you studied?
Yes,
Okay.
I am. So I've actually been there ever since. So from first year up until now, I'm still at the same university, and really that was not part of the plan. So I mean, during my honors degree, I decided to tutor, or there was an opportunity, and I thought, wow, tutoring, I mean, that's really next level. Now I need to share my knowledge with someone. And I was uncertain to say, but do I know something? Did I actually learn something throughout my 3 years? And well, I said, well, let's give it a go. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? And I took on the tutoring position, and I almost want to tell you that was the best decision of my life. And not just because of that's where I'm currently at, but during that time of my life, I actually realized that I do know something. I did actually learn something from my 3 years, and I had an opportunity to share that knowledge and experience with other students. And when you then repeat what is planning, organizing, leading, control, you actually feel quite chuffed. You feel really impressed with yourself, like you just learned or you just conveyed that knowledge in terms of what it is and what does it mean in a, let's call it an application of case study, for example, because at that stage I didn't have any industry experience at all. But I think that was my stepping stone for being a lecturer, actually, because from there I became a senior tutor, and I also had an opportunity just to lecture on an occasional basis for a lecturer that couldn't attend the lecture or whatever. And I mean, from there, while I did my master's, and then yes, I was appointed as a lecturer, which was never the idea. I never thought I would go into lecturing, but I love it. It's really, I'm passionate about it. I just love sharing my knowledge and just enjoying it. And I mean, that's why also for me, it's important for students just to realize that even though you plan to be, I plan to be a project manager, I'm far from that. But that's okay, because you just need to learn that life changes. Life will throw you a few curveballs, and it's about how you grab on each and every opportunity. Because I think if I didn't choose to be a tutor back then, I might not be where I'm currently at. And I think that's also important, like you've also previously mentioned, just to reflect back on the previous day, the previous week, even the year. What is it that you achieved? What changed? What did go according to plan and what did not? And what lessons can you learn from that? And I mean, so for me, sometimes you just have to take a risk. Grab on the opportunity. It might not work out as planned, but it might do. Mine did, so I was very fortunate for that. So yes, I'll just say, and I think that's also, call it a bit of entrepreneur inside me, is take on a risk. I know not everyone's risk takers, but I mean, this was not a risk in terms of losing money or anything. It was about, yes, I continue tutoring or not. So also depends on the type of risk, but I say grab it on. If there's an opportunity, go for it.
Wonderful. And so, I mean, there was that transition from the student life to then taking on more responsibilities, and then, you know, starting to get into more full-time formal roles of lecturing, and now your sort of senior role at the university, etc. And what I'm keen to understand, Chante, is, I mean, you know, you've taken us through the levels, and, you know, I also sort of experienced it myself. And I think there's quite a wide variety of experiences that students have at different institutions as to how much they are supported, not only in terms of the content. And typically, you know, universities are academic institutions, they hire top people from around the world, etc. But I do see a great difference between institutions as to how much they actually support and coach their students and help them through some of those other aspects of student life, etc. So what are your observations there? And I'm sure that you guys have got a great program for that, and maybe you want to share some of that and your learnings having made the transition, and then now helping students through what you also went through yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the challenges from a university perspective is, especially like our university, you've got a large number of students, and sometimes it becomes a bit, I want to say, impersonal, because you don't know the students one-on-one, you don't have that personal connection. So sometimes I want to say, for me, you lose out on an opportunity to help a student during that transition time. But then again, on the other side, sometimes you get a few students that approach a lecturer and say, you know what, next I need to find a job, or I don't know what I want to do. Where do I find a job? Where do I go? And I've had a few of those, and then it feels like I can help someone, because I went through that more or less. Obviously, I was in the same environment, but how can I guide you? What can I do? And I think that's really important, and I assume it depends from lecturer to lecturer, is just to assist that student. And I think one of the biggest things, if I look at entrepreneurship now, so it's really program specific, is the whole idea, well, for me, when I decided to study entrepreneurship, was I want to start a business at the end of this 3 years. And well, to my surprise, I didn't. But I mean, it doesn't mean the program was bad, but it's just on the other is, but how do I do it? And I think, like I said, I'm talking from an entrepreneurship perspective now, is in the 3rd year, the students set up a business plan. You have to come up with an idea and say, you know what, this is what I want to do. I want to sell cookies or open a bakery, for example. How do I set up a business plan and how do I do it? And for me, when I was 3rd year, I came up with the idea. It was brand new. According to me, it didn't exist. I was actually excited about it. And I actually considered to start that business using that business plan. And listening to the students and getting their feedback, they experienced the same thing, is to say, you know what, we didn't even know what was a business plan. We didn't even know how do we start a business, for example. And this journey that they walk throughout, setting up a business plan and having some confidence to walk out and say, there's a business plan, approach an investor, let's get this business up and running. And I think that was one of the positive aspects, specifically with this program in particular, is to get students on board. And I know currently they are actually busy adapting the program a bit to make it even more practical. So let's say you have an entire year, your last year, you set up your business plan, but then you actually have to, during your studies, you have to approach an investor. So ideally, when you graduate, you've started your business. And I mean, that would be absolutely amazing. And I think the same could apply for other qualifications. So even if you look at IT, for example, if you could bring in an internship during your final year of studies, just to get that actual working experience, because I think also sometimes you study this degree, but majority, I don't want to say majority, I don't know the stats on it, but there's a lot of students that end up completely in another direction. It might be because they didn't realize what actually this job entails. Is it going to be interesting enough, or am I just going to sit on a computer the entire day? Or I need to work with people, which I don't want to do. And I think that's also one of the things, and I know our university in particular is trying to address that. So having that type of internships, basically we call it work integrated learning, to bring that in. But it becomes challenging when, I mean, my module business management for 3rd years, there's 400 students and I'm the only lecturer on it. So it becomes challenging to manage that. And I mean, that's probably where it's beneficial for your, let's say, diplomas or your smaller groups. I mean, entrepreneurship, there's usually 60 students. So that's manageable. I mean, you can take them out to an incubation hub. You can basically show them how it works out there, where, like I said, with the bigger groups, it's a bit more difficult. But I think what I've noticed in our department is we've got lecturers that's really involved with the student. We try to help you. If you have any, I mean, a student once asked me, where do I go and set up a CV? Or how do I create a CV, for example? And I'm like, yes, you know what, well, not in our modules, we don't teach you that, but bring it. Let's set up a time, let's go through it. And I think it comes down to not just learning knowledge content, but it's preparing that student for the work environment. And I know a lot of businesses, I don't want to use the word complain, but they've got a concern that students are not necessarily prepared for the working environment. And I think that's also where universities needs to work together with, call it, private sector, just to close that gap between theoretical knowledge and actually what we expect you to do in the job. So if we know that if the student, let's say, 1st year of working needs to do A, B, and C, we can ensure that that's actually aligned in our module outcomes. So just to bridge the gap between the two. So in short, I want to say from our perspective, in certain programs that are happening, it's currently in place, like the entrepreneurship program. But I mean, with the bigger qualifications, it becomes a bit more challenging. So, but yes, it's really important to close that gap, both for the student perspective and then the businesses, let's say, in the private sector itself.
Fantastic, Chante. Thank you. And I mean, it sounds really great what you guys are doing, and an inspiration to other institutions to see student success, not only in terms of that qualification, but also then moving into the application of what they've learned and the value that they're going to deliver for an employer, or that they're going to create as an entrepreneur, and bringing that back into the campus experience and the process of actually getting the degree. I mean, I know in engineering, you know, we went and did vac work for 4 or 5 weeks. I did mechanical engineering, and we were out at the power stations in December, you know, so I would be, you know, finish our exams, and then we off, you know, would go and work on the power stations for 4 or 5 weeks. And, you know, we did that 2 or 3 years of our degree. So by the time you get out, you've already got 3 months experience, effectively. I could put that on my CV. I had 2-3 months experience as a junior engineer on a power station, you know, by the time I got my qualification. And I know that, I mean, you know, at WITS, there was a strong partnership with industry to say, look, we've got these students coming through. We want them to be meaningful when they walk out of here, not just theoreticians, but, you know, practical, you know, engineers in the workplace, etc. So Chante, I think that's really great. And the more that institutions can do, or the more that we create the communities for students to experience those vocations and those, you know, workplace insights, etc. I think the more it is going to give students just an inspiration of how they're going to be successful, you know, through their studies. So Chante, I mean, let's maybe just then touch on your very interesting research and your role at UJ. So I mean, I guess you're now studying your PhD and doing some research, and I want to find out more about it and how it links in with your role as an ambassador of Fourth Industrial Revolution. I mean, this is such an important topic, you know, especially, and, you know, something in South African context, you know, we see as a big driver of growth for us, particularly in the sort of entrepreneurial space that, you know, you've been spending a lot of time in. So take us through that process, your PhD, where you are, what you want to achieve with it, what value it's going to contribute, how it links to your current role, etc.
So first of all, I was very fortunate. I applied for a bursary to do a double degree with University of Johannesburg and then the Vrije University in Amsterdam, Netherlands. And I applied for it, and it was like, well, yes, this is really a big jump for me. Will I be able to get it? And I was really surprised, but I got the bursary, so that's really amazing. So basically what it entails is I complete, I want to say, 1 PhD degree, but I get 2 degrees at the end. So I need to obviously adhere to the requirements of University of Johannesburg and then the Vrije University in Amsterdam as well. So I spent 3 months in the Netherlands and 9 months in South Africa. So
Wow.
what really, I want to say, wonderful about this opportunity is, besides the PhD and the topic itself, is just to get a different type of experience, to engage with international colleagues, get to know students from all over the world. This year, when I visited just before lockdown and everything, I was actually sharing an office with Chinese students, and just to get to know their culture. And I'm not even saying we had a conversation, but just the way that they do things, how versus how we do things. For example, they were sitting in the office literally working from 8 to 5, and I was sitting there and was like, I'm not working hard enough. Like, how can they work from 8 to 5 and I'm not working from 8 to 5? But just that experience. So, I mean, this is a wonderful opportunity for me, and I'm sure it's going to open up a few doors in the future. But just to get back to the topic is, so I'm focusing on Fourth Industrial Revolution, but I'm looking at particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, because I'm really interested in how SMEs contribute to the economic growth of a country. And considering now this Fourth Industrial Revolution, we tend to talk about how important it is, but we also don't look at how difficult it is for smaller businesses to adapt. I mean, it's, in my personal opinion, I think it's easier for a large organization that's got the resources, the knowledge to, I want to say, quickly adapt from traditional versus technology-driven approaches. But looking at a small business that's got limited resources, it might only employ 100 people. How do we do it? And if we don't do it, we basically close down our doors. And that was really the reason why I chose this topic, is to see, but how can an SME look at their business model and how can they transform it so that it's basically technology driven? in short. And so my sample that I'm looking at South African SMEs, and fortunate enough, I'm looking at the Netherlands as well. So looking at from a first world versus a third world, well, developing versus developed economy, and how they approach things differently. So I've had a study that I've done so far, and just reading the responses from the SMEs is completely different from South African SMEs. I mean, considering the working conditions, the environment, and all of it. And ultimately, I'm not necessarily going to compare the two countries, because it's, I don't want to say impossible, but you're going to have to consider different types of conditions to compare a developed and a developing economy. But ultimately, perhaps we can learn from them and they could learn from us. It doesn't mean because they developed, we only can learn from them. It could be vice versa. And I'm really excited to see what is their perspective on what is a business model that's driven by technology, and what South African SMEs, how they view it. And at the end, the whole goal is really develop a model on how can we transform it, and then how do we measure it? When do we know it's enough? Or when do we know that this is actually, it has been implemented? So looking at all the stages of your business model and how do we measure it? And I think it's important for SMEs, because I want to say it might not be as easy or achievable for them to adapt for each and every single change in the environment, in the business environment, where with a large organization, it might be easier. So just to understand, have I changed a bit? To what level have I incorporated technology, and can I measure, I want to say, the level of success thereof? Because now we use the cloud technology, but what does it mean for our end goal, or how does it contribute to the overall strategy thereof? So I'm really excited about the topic. I really enjoy it, and I mean, it's really fascinating. So any webinar that's on Fourth Industrial Revolution, you'll probably see me there attending. If there's a course on digital transformation, I mean, your course that I completed, I just love doing it, because there's always something new that I learn from it. And on the other side, I had an opportunity now to develop a short course for the Vrije University in Amsterdam based on my PhD. And I mean, that's also completely different now, because now it's like I'm still learning about this topic, and now next year I've got an opportunity to share that knowledge. So that's also, for me, I'm really excited about that, to see how that's going to go down. And I think also getting feedback from the students could also help me in my final stages of my PhD. So I want to say there's really a few opportunities already that's out there that I'm really excited about. And just to answer your question in terms of the Fourth Industrial Revolution ambassadorship, so I actually just asked this one lady. I told her, you know what, you do absolutely amazing things. I did a short course at UJ, which is artificial intelligence. And I said, I want to be part of this. I don't know how, but I want to share my knowledge. I want to attend events. I want to be part of the cloud debate. How can I be part of it? So we went through a few questions, small little interview, if you could call it that. And they said, you know what, let's jump on board. She's like, you basically, just to get out that what UJ is currently doing in terms of the 4IR, and what we are, the way that our qualifications are set up, the way that we change things. I mean, the one that was really, I want to say, close to home or close to my heart was in terms of breast cancer, and how you could actually, I want to say, pick it up without, or let's say diagnose it without using an X-ray. So especially in your rural communities, they don't have an opportunity to go to a clinic or to go to a hospital. So one of the professors, it was a Chinese professor, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember his name now. He was part of this in actually using technology and artificial intelligence to basically do a scan that nurses can do within the rural community, and then say, you know what, you've got breast cancer or you don't. And from there, they could take you to a clinic, hospital for treatment and that. And I mean, these things is really, it contributes on a bigger scale than just in a business where you make use of the cloud, for example. This is really on a bigger scale, and there's a lot of amazing things that the university is doing. And I was like, I want to be part of it. I want to share this, and because not everyone, you would actually be surprised about how many people do not know what the fourth industrial revolution is. So if I tell them what I do in my PhD, they're like, what is that? Technology? Okay, it makes a bit more sense. So I think there's really still a gap between all of, let's call it the academics, the private sector that's driven towards it, versus, I want to use the word, the ordinary people. That's, what is it? What are you guys talking about? And how can we bridge the gap between it? And I think that was also one of the things where I said, you know what, I want to be part. So there, unfortunately, due to COVID, there was not a few events that was cancelled or put on hold. But I'm sure in the next year, 2021, there'll be a few more events that I can be part of and just share my knowledge and gain more knowledge. I mean, we never stop learning. There's always someone that knows more or better than you do. So it's always good to continue that learning.
No, Chante, fantastic. And I follow, I mean, you do put some wonderful posts on LinkedIn, and I follow and read them, and I gain a lot from them. So thank you for just the passion that you bring to the topic. And I think you are a great ambassador for this, and it links so nicely in with your topic and your research. And I mean, this is something that comes up quite often, is that you must choose a topic that you are passionate about, that is going to keep you going through, you know, the long, hard years of completing a PhD. Because as much as there are many enjoyable aspects of it, there are lots of aspects of doing a PhD that, you know, you really have to dig quite deep and work quite hard and stay up quite late and put in lots of hours, etc. And if you're doing all of that for a topic that, you know, is not really going to keep you going, you're going to struggle. So, I mean, I guess, you know, maybe the advice, you know, in what you've been saying and what's come through so strongly and how you've been talking about your topic is that you absolutely must be passionate about your PhD topic. And that's something that's come through very strongly, Chante, which I really appreciate. And thank you very much for that. Any final thoughts? I mean, just words of advice and wisdom. I mean, we've got students out there in different stages of their degrees and in different qualifications, and obviously all wanting to be successful in life and to, you know, envisage their student success, both in terms of their qualification, but then also their contribution to industry, very much like what, you know, you've been doing now, but also for themselves to get ahead, you know, make a success of their life in general. And, you know, people who choose a student career, to make progress and to get ahead, what, you know, in your view are some of the important things to focus on? I mean, I love the earlier bit where you spoke about the right mindset. Maybe give me some of the practical things that, looking back, have made the difference for you.
Well, I would definitely start off by saying you have to be organized. I'm one of the people that's really fond about being organized and time management skills, because I mean, time management, it's all about being able to do everything that you need to do and you don't get stressed about it. And I think that's really important. So, I mean, as a student, you're going to experience challenges and difficulties. You have 5, 6 subjects that you need to pay attention to. Each one has got its own requirements, but you can fit it all. I mean, if you just plan ahead, so if you've got, because a lot of the time students complain, you know, we've got 3 deadlines on the same day. Yes, it's going to happen. Unfortunately, that's reality. But if you plan and you are organized to say, okay, this is my deadline, which one should I focus on? And my advice would really be, take one and finish it. I know we all brag about being women and we can multitask, but I mean, in reality, multitasking is not that easy. And you also waste time on switching between different things that you need to focus on. So I always, for me, that worked. I would focus on one assessment or one project. I would finish it. I would tick it off. If there was no tick, it's not done. And then you move on to the next one. So for me, that's really just important. I mean, you can make a list, have a to-do list, put the deadline for each one. And if all 3 is on the same day, choose one, finish it off, move on to the next one. And then for me, it might seem like, yes, we know we should do it, but get enough sleep. It's really important you need to learn to tell what your body needs and when does it need it. And I mean, we're all different. For me, I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, because if I don't get enough sleep, my brain does not function the way it should. But a lot of students, we call them the night owls. I mean, they work 2 o'clock in the morning because we see when the emails are coming through. And that's fine. But you need to know what works for you and what does not. And I mean, a lot of students, decide to, let's say, study the night before. It's fine to study the night before, but if you try to cramp everything because you didn't plan ahead, if you still study 5 minutes before you're entering the venue, for me, honestly, I think it's doing more harm than good, because you also need to take in, and you are going to remember it. Somewhere something did stick, even though you might have left it till the last minute. So it's also really, and it comes down once again just to plan ahead. And then I want to say, from a lecturer perspective, you need to summarize your content. I mean, I'm looking now specifically from a theoretical aspect, but I mean, it can be applied to any qualification for that matter. It's information overload. I mean, there's a lot. You're not going to remember everything. You're not going to be able to remember it like a parrot. It's important to summarize. And if I say summarize, I really recommend, and might be the lecturer inside me, is to attend lecture classes. I mean, we do give out hints and tips during the lecture. And there's a reason why you've got a lecture, not just for us to explain it, but during that 90 minutes, for example, you sit and you focus on this specific subject or module. And there you summarize it, you make your notes, you focus for that entire 90 minutes. Then you move on to the next module. Now you sit in class for 90 minutes. You're listening, you're not making notes, you're not highlighting, you're not summarizing content. Now suddenly after the lecture, you need to do it. Where if you've done it during that time, you could just move on to the next one. But it also, like I said, I like to be organized. Things have to go according to plan. But for me, from a student perspective and a lecturer perspective, that really helps, is just to plan accordingly, because there's a reason why we have that 90 minutes. And there's a reason why we have, I want to say, in lecture study hours and self-study hours. That self-study is actually not for you to try to remember what the lecturer said. That is to go through the work, prepare for assessments and tests and all of it. And I mean, with that also, for me, that really worked. I like to use colors, but it might just be the way that I'm set up or organized. And because for me, I remembered in a test or exam, if I couldn't remember something, I remembered, but that was color blue. That page was highlighted with blue, and I tried to remember it. And I mean, the way that I studied, I was like a real parrot. I would literally paraphrase everything and I would repeat it out loud. So I want to say, if I studied my entire chapter, I would go to my mom or my dad, and I would basically explain to them what I've just learned. And that's also important to see that, you know what, I don't just paraphrase or be a parrot repeating what the textbook said, but I actually have the ability to convey it in my own words. And that also shows you that you know your work, you remember it, but you can put it in your own words as well. And I think that also, that's what's important, especially for third year honors and onwards, is we want to see that you don't remember the content. We want to see that you actually understand that you can put it in your own words. So, I mean, once again, it depends on the subject that you're studying. I mean, if it's maths or accounting, you need to sit and you need to work out and do your calculations. So it depends, but ultimately it comes down to really just understanding the content and being able to put it in your own words. And then I want to say my second best advice is communication. I mean, communication with, it can be your family, your support system, but also with your lecturers. And sometimes I think students feel like there's a big gap between student and lecturer, and they never consult. But really, from the few years that I've been lecturing, I want to say students that consult, they perform better. And not everyone has got the guts to ask a question during the lecture, which is fine. I mean, we don't all want to speak in front of a crowd. But that's why we have email. That's why we have consultation hours. If you've got a question, ask it. And really, there's no such thing as a stupid question. I appreciate a question, because that shows me that you want to learn. You don't understand something, please explain it to me. And I'm one of those. I would explain it to you 10 times. It doesn't matter. If you don't understand it, I'll continue to re-explain it. But really, even if it's a personal challenge that you're experiencing, study related, you would actually be surprised how supporting lecturers can be. So for me, communication is really important. To miss a deadline because of a family crisis and you didn't communicate, that should not be the case. Rather tell, you know, this is my situation. We all go through it. We all have our own personal lives. And I always tell students, that's the biggest thing. We have our own life. but if I don't know about it, I can't help you.
Yeah.
So that's really, communication is key. And then I want to say my last one is have fun. I mean, enjoy your student life, make the best of it, but have the right balance. You need to know when should you stay focused, but also know when should you just relax a little and enjoy the journey. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, is just to have fun. Yes, it's important, you have to pass, but you will pass it, but you should also have fun, because work will never stop, but university life does. And it's really important just to have that fun and take a few memories from it.
Wow, Chante, thank you so much. I mean, I think it's been inspiring to listen to you and the passion that comes through in your role and the research that you're doing and the wonderful advice that you've given to students and lecturers and the insights that you've given us to your academic journey. I really appreciate it. On behalf of everybody that's listening today, I think it's been packed with value and wisdom and insights. And there's absolutely no excuse, I think, for people now to take what they've learned and get out there and apply it. And I just love your last point about having fun, enjoy it. You know, these are fantastic years and we've got wonderful opportunities, and the world is a fascinating place to live in at the moment. So grab all those opportunities with both hands and make the most of it. Chante, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and having the opportunity to share all my experiences, difficulties, and just being passionate about it. And I wish everyone all the best and just keep going. Thank you so much, Peter.